clinician. So
Yeah.
you have a clinical background.
Yeah, because I have a
And
friend.
have writing skills as well.
Because I have a friend. She worked in advocacy originally in the WFF.
Hello everyone. Just
Well,
welcome to Discovering Buddhism. Just got a couple of people in the room, so could be some conversation as well. So I hope you're well. Welcome to our fourth class on transforming problems. I sent out the notes this morning. Have you got them? There's also a one page of questions and answers that came with the module. And might have a look at that if we get time, but fairly self-explanatory. Doesn't quite follow everything that we've done in the actual teachings, nightly teachings, but anyway, that's what they provide. James, okay, when you come back, can you just close the door again?
Okay.
Yeah. I'll just wait for James to come back and we'll do our few minutes of meditation, breath meditation.
Alan, what are we allowed to bring in the way of offerings now? Do they have to be, like, not loose biscuits or things have to be all sealed in separate packs?
No, I think, you mean for like pujas and...
No, just to bring, like the class, people used to bring cakes and biscuits and things when I used to come before.
I don't think-
mean, since COVID.
I think that's all gone now. We used to be like that because I did practice here yesterday afternoon, and we brought things that were in packets and things that weren't. We just distributed them.
So it's all right to
Loose.
bring anything like that?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just talking to someone in the class. It's funny having two audiences. We'll start in a minute. I'm just waiting for someone to come back. Or maybe we'll start anyway. We'll just do a few minutes of breath meditation. Get comfortable. Just coming into our body and mind. A few moments to feel how fortunate we are, how to be able to study the Dharma together, do some practice. Remember, we're doing the practice for benefit of others as well as ourselves. Ultimately, become fully enlightened beings to be of maximum benefit to others. Now we just come into the body, just check our back is reasonably straight, shoulders relaxed, eyes can be closed or just gently gazing ahead. And our object is the breath, which is bringing our attention to the breath. Now noticing what the breath is doing. Breathing out all the tension of the day, the busyness, physical tension in the body, all the distractions. Just watching each breath entering, leaving the body. Move into the body with the breath. Nothing to change, nothing to judge. Checking out again, are we still on the breath? We're being distracted by thoughts. That's okay, just gently let go and patiently come back to the breath. One breath at a time, full flow of the in-breath, full flow of the out-breath. That's right. So we just have a look at those 3 questions there, just to review what we did last week. Just have a look at that. First one, we actually did verse 4, 5, and 6 last week. Remember that what we're doing is just looking at this teaching for the 8 verses of thought transformation by Langri Champa, a great Tibetan master. And we've got 2 more to go tonight. And these last week we did those verses 4, 5, and 6. First one, why are the great harm givers? And those overwhelmed by suffering are precious treasures. So just to refresh your memory as to what the verse said. So this is verse 4. Whenever I see beings who are wicked in nature, overwhelmed by violent negative actions and suffering, I shall hold such rare ones dear, as if I have found a precious treasure. So this is how we react to people who are actually doing not just harm to ourselves, but to other beings. What sometimes called the bloody dictators, plenty of those in the world today and have been in the past. An interesting documentary on Lenin and Russian history yesterday, last night on the TV, with the incredible atrocities and genocides committed by Lenin and Stalin, the Russian dictators. So that's just, we've had Hitler and we've had Pol Pot and so on. So these people are included in our compassion meditation. And this is what this verse is saying. And also those who are themselves suffering, who might, as the Dalai Lama said, could be very unattractive people. Traditionally the lepers. Now you could think of people who have, contagion, the pandemic, during the pandemic, the virus, who could threaten our health. And so why should we treat these people as being particularly precious and dear? I think the other good example, I think, is the politicians we love to hate, the Trumps. And Australia, we have plenty of politicians who it would be hard to, for me anyway, to put in the dearly loved group and see them equal as our most precious partners, parents, and so on. Remember, the teachings on compassion say that all beings equally deserve our loving kindness, compassion. And so one of the teachings, I think it was His Holiness, says one thing to remember is it's not, we think in a bigger scale. If we think of past lives, we've all committed probably every negative action that's possible. So this is one way. We've all done the worst actions sometimes in our previous incarnation. We've all committed incredible good deeds and also incredibly bad deeds. So no one is sort of, you look at the big scale, no one is unless they're Buddhists, unless they're Buddhists and Bodhisattvas, is exempt from having committed atrocities and bad actions, things that will ultimately cause us suffering. That's the other way. The more harm somebody's doing, the more they're going to suffer later, according to the teachings on karma. Because every action of body, speech, and mind, according to the Buddhist view, is going to have repercussions. And if it's a negative action of body, speech, and mind, killing, slander, torture, or anything that will harm others, then that effect of that action will usually happen in another lifetime. It could happen if it's a very bad action in this lifetime, but karma is never lost. One of the teachings on karma is it's never lost unless we purify, unless we do purification practices. The karma is just there like money in the bank, accumulating. So that's various ways we can help our mind to take into our compassion circle these people who are everything from repulsive to annoying. So, and just remember that every Buddha, anyone who's actually achieved any attainments towards enlightenment has to include the all beings in their compassion meditation. I think I mentioned last week that the refugees, some of those refugees from Tibet who'd been tortured, still showing that they have still using compassion and demonstrating that they actually forgave their torturers, their harm givers. And so that's sort of very high attainment to be able to do that. So if we want to make progress, we have to just follow the compassion teachings. It helps the practice. As all the teachers say, if everything's going well, we don't actually have, no one's annoying us, no one's causing trouble. We're not going to make any progress. We need these harm givers to challenge us so that we can actually practice patience or forgiveness or loving kindness. Anyway, so basically we just covered most of that last week. Feel free to ask things as we go on. When should we remember this verse? I think number 6 says that on number 5, when out of envy others mistreat me with abuse, insults, and the like, I shall accept defeat and offer the victory to others. Okay, so this is forgiving our tormentors and abusers. And I've just put a question there. Do we have to do this all the time? Is it going to be beneficial? When should we not offer the victory to others? So I think I mentioned last week that His Holiness says there are times when we have to take countermeasures. We shouldn't be, it's not telling us to be doormats and just be victims. If the person who's doing the harm is harming others as well as ourselves, and then we need to take countermeasures. So that means we may need to restrain that person, we may need to report that person, to a person who's committing domestic violence next door or whatever. When we see somebody doing harm to ourselves or others, we may have to take countermeasures to prevent. We're preventing them from doing more harm and committing more negative actions and harming, which means that they will suffer as well as others. So sometimes, the other time, if we're not capable of forgiving, or we're still at the early stages, and we're going to just bottle up when we're being mistreated, anger. So we need to use the teachings on anger, how harmful it is to ourselves. Think of what, think of the results of anger. They're only going to harm us. They're only harm. Anger just burns up positive karma, and it actually will inevitably means that we're going to suffer in the future, in this lifetime or future lifetime. So we might need to work on our own patience to be able to not to bottle things up and yet still be angry. That can be just as bad. The other one, when those who've helped us give harm in return, why should we regard that person as my holy guru? So various reasons. So this is just that's verse number 6. Someone I've benefited and whom I have great hopes gives me terrible harm, I shall regard that person as my holy guru. So again, the answers are submit. First of all, they could be your holy guru. Is the way Buddhas work, according to many Buddhist sutras, is that they can manifest as different forms. They could manifest as an enemy, somebody who's challenging your giving you a challenge so that you can have the opportunity to practice patience, forgiveness, and so on. Just an interesting story. When I was at a retreat not last year, the year before, in 2019, my Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our head, our spiritual head, was teaching in France, in a place called Toulouse, called Vajrayogini Institute, a very beautiful centre in the south of France, in an old chateau. It used to be owned by Toulouse-Lautrec's family, the artist. So Rinpoche was giving teachings, and his attendant is called Venerable Roger Kunsang, an Australian monk. He started the Vajrayana Institute in the early 80s, Roger. And now he's been Lama Zopa's attendant for 20 or 30 years, many years. Very, very a wonderful, amazing person, Roger. So Rinpoche said he has tried to make Roger angry many times, but failed. So this is because Roger is working for his guru, which is Lama Zopa. I mean, Rinpoche is very difficult to pin down in terms of schedule, and Roger's job is to actually get him to play onto planes and get him to teachings on time and get him to getting to airports. And it's sometimes, quite often, Rinpoche will find there's something more important to do and give a teaching or stop at the side of the road and bless animals, and they might miss the plane or they might be incredibly late. So Roger is constantly challenged with passions. So anyway, it's just a perfect, and Roger, he says Roger has never become angry, which is just extraordinary. So, and I believe him too, because Roger's a very amazing person. So this is just an example that the guru is obvious, because Roger and Rinpoche are guru or disciple. But sometimes teachers could manifest as ugly women. There's a good story of an old leper woman who was trying to cross the river. This is back in Buddhist time, I think. Very unattractive, and the Tibetan monks were passing by and they wouldn't help. She was asking them to help her cross the river. And so the higher monks wouldn't go near it because obviously very unattractive. And then one of the very junior monks took pity on this woman and put her on his shoulder to carry across the river. And halfway across, the woman manifested as the Buddha, and both the monk and this ugly woman went up into space and the monk went into what they call a pure land, where he practices Dharma and becomes enlightened very quickly. So this was a manifestation of the Buddha as a very ugly, unattractive woman. So there's other ones of Buddha manifesting as a dog. I think I may have mentioned it. That was dying at the side of a road. And this is a Sangha. Sangha, a very great Indian meditator, had been meditating in a cave for years, trying to see the Buddha or see a manifestation of an enlightened being. And he just didn't make any progress. And he was giving up and went back to said, I'm not doing any good, I'll just go back to the village. And on the way back to the village, there was this dog lying, ridden with maggots, dying with all these infections. And a Sangha took great pity and wanted to help the dog. So he's trying to sort of think of a way to get the maggots off the dog. And if he used his finger, the maggots would have probably squashed. So out of compassion, he bent down and used his tongue to take the maggots off the dog's body. And at that second, the dog turned into Manjushri, which is manifestation of the Buddha. He said, and Asanga said, I've been trying to see you for the last so many years. And so the Asanga, Manjushri said, I've been here all the time, but it was your mind that was actually obscure. As soon as you started practicing compassion for the dog, all your obstacles cleared away, and so you could see me. Okay, so there are these stories that demonstrate that the Buddha can manifest. They can manifest objects, food, bridges, rivers, rain, all these different ways that, according to the needs of beings. So perhaps somebody who might seem to be the complete worst person when we're being challenged could be a bodhisattva or Buddha. There was a teacher was another great Lama who had a cook who was extremely bad-tempered and quite rude to a teacher who's incredibly high Lama. And all the entourage said, "Why don't you just get rid of that cook? He's so rude." And he said, no, he's the most precious person because I really like him because then I can make sure that I'm always practicing patience. The more he insults me, the more I have to practice patience. So there's plenty of examples. Probably enough on that, those questions.
Sort of similar to like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism.
Just a bit louder.
Oh, it's sort of similar to Christianity or Judaism or Islam, the idea of angels.
Today, what?
Like in Judeo-Abrahamic religion, the idea of angels appearing and
The idea of
angels.
or angels.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well.
They teach you something and then they disappear out of nowhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's terrific examples. Lama Yeshe, who founded this group FPMT with Lama Zopa, they were the two main teachers in the 70s and 80s who set up these centres and started teaching Western. There's a biography of his life, and there's so many examples where he actually seemed to perform miracles. Like he would just be somewhere where he was needed. When he was actually somebody else, he couldn't have got there so quickly if he was just a normal human being. He sort of somehow went from one side of the mountain to the other. So there's definitely the capacity for these great beings to manifest when they're needed at different places very quickly.
And to fly.
Yes, well, what they call mundane attainments, if you achieve what they call shamatha, which is to be able to concentrate perfectly on one object, which is something that we need to do if we're going to make progress. We need to actually have good concentration, single point of concentration, which is what we just did in the breath meditation. But so those beings who achieve that incredible stability of mind, they also sometimes, as a byproduct, have the ability to fly and to move very quickly. So they actually, if they're walking from A to B, they can get there within a few seconds. There's just something about the body's lightness of being. But it's not. If you hear from Lama Zopa, the Dalai Lama, they say these are not great attainments because you have it, or in past lives you've practiced this and you've attained shamatha, but you're not in alignment. You've lost it. Okay? So it doesn't mean that you can't. If you attain single point of concentration, it doesn't mean you've got it forever. Okay, you need to practice it with other practices such as compassion, meditations on emptiness, wisdom. They think it's not something that should be an end in itself. It's not necessarily a spiritual practice. Just perfect concentration is not necessarily a spiritual practice. And it's not necessarily Buddhist because there's plenty of single point of meditation practiced by Hindus before the Buddha's time. It's not a technique that came with the Buddha. So so these things, but the Buddhas themselves and the Bodhisattvas have combined their single point of concentration with compassion. So that's why they can actually anticipate what beings want and be able to help beings, as well as have that incredible concentration. So just maybe we'll just move to the seventh verse. We've just got two more to get through. Just reading it in short, both directly and indirectly, I offer every happiness intended to all my mothers, I shall secretly take upon myself all their harmful actions and sufferings. So this is what is called compassion. It's a compassion practice, and in Sanskrit it's called Tonglen, giving and taking meditation. It's a very, very advanced compassion practice where we use our breath using incredible and very advanced practice to take the suffering of others into our hearts on behalf of them. So it's just, it always reminds me of the Christian teachings on how Jesus died for others' sins on the cross. I'm never quite sure how that happens, but this practice is the same intention, the same motivation to wish that whatever suffering I'm going through, I could experience on the part of others to prevent them having to experience. And not only that, but even if I'm not suffering, I would still want to take whatever suffering other beings are experiencing away from them. So this is, and then at the same time, every joy and happiness and insight and wisdom and compassion I've got, I want to give back to them. So this is compassion practice, Tonglen, taught by in the Mahayana tradition. Probably the main text on this is the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, one that the Holiness Dalai Lama often teaches and often refers back to. It's one of his favourite texts. I think the updated name is called The Way of the Bodhisattvas. So it's quite a small volume. It's only maybe 50 pages or less. And so it's just this great Pandit Shantideva. This is who was living in Nalanda. Nalanda is where it was the centre of the Buddhist tradition in India. When was it? I would say, I'm not sure exactly when. But when Buddhism was actually the most predominant religion in India. It was only for a few hundred years. And then the Mughals and the other invaders came and Buddhism declined and went to Tibet. So Shantideva, they used to call him, what's a better name, I can't remember. It meant eat, sleep and go to the toilet. They couldn't see that this man was actually doing anything useful in the monastery. So they wanted to get rid of him. And he was actually an incredible practitioner, but they didn't see that. So they asked him to teach a session to the monks, thinking that he would be completely embarrassed and have to leave the monastery. But he actually gave the most unbelievable teaching, which is the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And from then on, he left the monastery voluntarily and just went around and gave teachings around India. But that was Shantideva. And what got me onto that, I wonder? Oh yes, so he was a great teacher of this Tonglen meditation, giving and taking. So His Holiness says, now, it's obviously we're not actually taking and giving. To an outsider, they say, "Oh, this is just fantasy. You know, all you're doing is just wishing that everyone would be, without problems. And it's not actually doing it." But His Holiness says this is actually. He admits that this is simulated to start off with. Just like learning to fly a plane, we actually have to do it in a pretend plane. And so he says, but you have to actually simulate it before it becomes genuine and natural, but it will become genuine and natural as we progress. And all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have attained this ability to give and take. So being willing to even, I think, one of the great prayers that His Holiness gives, as long as sentient beings remain, as long as space remains, then I too will remain to dispel the misery of the world. So as long as there's even one suffering person in the world or being in the world, then I will be there to relieve them, to help them. That's the great Bodhisattva attitude. It's quite a special attitude. Usually it's translated as a special attitude. So this is what's being taught here. It's secret because it's not practiced publicly. It's not taught. His Holiness said it's only taught even in Tibet, in the monastery, to the very advanced monks, because it's such a difficult practice. And also secret means that if they are practicing it, they don't advertise, they don't sort of publicise it or make it public what they're doing. Like Shantideva, he was completely normal. Nobody could actually tell that he was actually a Buddha, but he was just doing these practices in the monastery privately and secretly. So, as His Holiness says, the true Mahayana wish is not to, I want Buddhahood. Wanting Buddhahood shouldn't be the first thing we want. As proper Mahayana practitioners, what we want is to relieve the suffering of sentient beings. We want to help all beings in all different realms. And at the moment, we're limited because we're just unenlightened beings. We need to actually purify our minds, be capable of doing great things, be able to certainly understand what beings need, and every single human being has its different mind, different needs. So we need to have a Buddha mind to be able to help beings in the most profound way, the best way. So in order to help beings, I want Buddhahood. Not I want Buddhahood. Therefore, I have to practice Buddha to get to Buddhahood. I want to help others. I can't do much as I am, so I must become Buddha. So this is what His Holiness has said in this teaching on this verse. And then His Holiness, there's a little bit at the bottom of page 1 there about one of the things of how to develop patience. I think we've actually mentioned this in earlier weeks. So if we're going to help beings, we're going to have to actually go through, take on suffering. So if the wish to take on suffering means that we have to develop ways of not becoming impatient when our body's in pain or so on, or when we have really annoying people, or we are being tormented by others and so on. So we need to practice patience. And these are just, he says, to help develop this, these are some of the things. Think about karma, how it works, how this is the very basic level. I don't want to suffer, so therefore I know karma, how karma works. I know karma is certain. If I do harm other beings, I will suffer in the future. But that's what he would call selfish compassion. If I want to help myself, practice compassion. If I want to help others, practice compassion. So, so just a couple of different suggestions by His Holiness on how we can help develop our patience. And we recognise that we're not enlightened beings, so it's just inevitable that we're going to we're still in what we call samsara, this area where we have a body. Going to be subject to birth, aging, sickness and death. We have a mind that still has these, what they call afflictions, obstacles, so we're going to suffer. It's going to happen. Okay. And Lama's good at actually telling us the advantages of patience. It means that we're going to be born with a very beautiful body. Patience has the effect, karmic effect of giving us good looks in future life, makes us popular. People are attracted to somebody who's got a patient mind, and we we sleep well at night, we have a clear conscience, we have a calm mind. So just a few points there I've got on Venerable Sapel's teachings on this section. She says, directly and indirectly, in that verse, I offer every happiness and benefit to mother. It actually means, in this life, may I be able to help others, and in future, indirectly means in future life, in that whatever form that we have in the future. So in secret means, we've already mentioned that these being practiced privately. His Holiness always says that he's a simple Buddhist monk, but if you just listen to his teachings, you can see that he's not a simple Buddhist monk. He's got incredible insight, compassion, has all the qualities of a Buddha or Bodhisattva. Quietly practicing. The other thing that various Tibetan teachers have said is how good Christians are at helping other beings physically. His Holiness has said this. He says, in Tibet, we didn't have this tradition of like the Christians, how they go up, they set up schools, hospitals. They actually have hands-on experience. I mean, things like Bill Cruz in Sydney, who feeds thousands of people a day. Mother Teresa, of course. So this tradition is admired by Tibetan teachers. And Lama Zopa, because all these all the Buddhist actual practice of, and in Tibet traditionally practice of Buddhism and study was in monasteries. Monasteries are sort of up on the hill there, and the ordinary people would sponsor the monks. The ordinary people wouldn't be studying Buddhism or meditating, but they would pay the monks, sponsor them to come and do practices to help if they're sick or relatives die and so on. But there isn't this hands-on tradition in Tibet. So as Tibetan Buddhism becomes more Western, a good example is Lama Zopa's projects. Lama Zopa set up in India retirement homes for Tibetans in particular. In Bodh Gaya, where the pilgrimage place of Bodh Gaya, the place where Buddha was enlightened, he set up a school, a leper hospital for lepers, clinics for HIV victims, including children. So these things, modern Lama Zopa definitely has moved out, moved into the realm of hands-on, but it also is still doing the teachings and initiations and giving meditation retreats and so on. So we can't actually take on others' karma. Even the Buddha can't actually take on Buddha's, and they can't enlighten beings just by the force of their mind. They can give blessings, they can show the path, they can give teaching, they can do incredible things, but the actual work of travelling the path to enlightenment, it has to be done by each individual. So in that sense, it's different to the Christian tradition where there's this sense of giving your life to Christ and you're saved. It's easy. But there's nothing, because of karma is certain. Each individual has their own karma to work out, and so the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can help them along the path, give them teachings, give them practices, mantras, whatever, and they can, but they can't actually enlighten us. Otherwise, we'd all be enlightened. The Buddhists would have enlightened us years ago. So, okay. So, but the other great tradition in all Buddhist traditions, I believe, is not to try and convert people. You don't go out and start preaching the Buddhist sutras publicly if people haven't asked for it. So that's very much against the Tibetan tradition and Buddhist tradition to actually, well, certainly in Tibetan tradition, I'm not that familiar with other schools of Buddhism like the Thais and so on, but I don't think they do. I've never heard it. what's it called, proselytizing or evangelizing. So that's certainly that thing that I really liked about Buddhism when I was just at the early stages, how nobody's forcing things or saying this is the one true way. On the contrary, His Holiness always says, if you can, stick to your own religion, okay? Just practice your own religion well. But if you've got the opportunity, it doesn't work for you, and you've got the opportunity to study another tradition, and that fits your mind better, okay? But he doesn't encourage it as a general thing. Depends on the individual. Okay, so just looking at any other notes I've got there. Yeah, there's think of there's usually something that we can look at in everyday life where somebody has done something out of total compassion without wanting anything in return. The ones I can think of are Kerry Packer. It was his driver who gave, I think it was his kidney, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Kerry Packer?
Mm-hmm.
Just out of no payment or anything, just out of wanting to serve his boss. The other one was Mark Colvin, who I used to listen to on the ABC. He's since passed away, but one of his listeners, he was on dialysis, and he's very much in the news. He lived for years on dialysis, and then this listener just phoned in and offered her kidney, and so he actually accepted that and managed to live many years longer. So we might know people in our own private life who've done incredible things for others as well, without any wish for personal gain. So this is a good example of this giving and taking out of compassion, out of wanting to relieve suffering. Fantastic. Plenty of examples. You don't, because the news is sort of usually the other way, looking at what bad things that people have done. It's nice when you actually see these things. Usually they're in some smaller program like Australia Story or something. It's not. It doesn't get on the headline that somebody gave a kidney to save somebody's life. So. Okay, how are we going with time? All right. So what we're going to do at the end of the class is just to try one of these autonomy meditations, and we'll just do the last verse before we get to that. So the last verse is actually about emptiness. This is, remember, with all the Buddhist teachings can be put into, the Tibetan Buddhist teachings can be put into these two packages: compassion, the compassion wing, and the wisdom wing. Compassion of the bird. You need the two wings for the bird to be able to fly to enlightenment. So this is all about the wisdom wing. Probably everything that's come before this is about compassion. All the 7 verses before this is about giving, developing loving kindness, compassion. But this one is looking at the wisdom side. I'll just read it. Undefiled by the stains of superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns, may I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. Okay. So the first bit is this great beings are not concerned with their own personal pressure. Well, that's basically the 8 worldly concerns. It's wanting material benefit, not wanting poverty, wanting praise, not blame, wanting a good reputation, not a bad reputation. There's a fourth one. But they basically wanting the good things of life. So not wanting, giving up that's basically that's renunciation, not pursuing individual happiness. May I perceive all phenomena as illusory. Okay, so what does His Holiness say about this? So we should be, first thing he says, these thought transformation practices should be done with the knowledge of the emptiness teaching. Emptiness teachings are incredibly subtle, but we need to keep in mind that nothing has any intrinsic nature, nothing physical in the phenomenal world, and nothing internally has something that is actually 100% existing from its own side, independently. This is the wisdom teaching. So that just having that thought will actually help progress with our compassion practices. So we need to keep from falling into the trap of thinking that there is this solidity to the world, which is our instinctive way of looking at the world. This will sort of softens that, and it's something we don't just attain wisdom of emptiness instantly. If we have complete understanding of emptiness, that is experiential understanding, we'd be a Buddha. Okay, that's Buddhahood. So if everything appears to be 100% there from its own side, but there is none. Okay, so this is what His Holiness is saying. Just realise that nothing is as it appears. Keep this in the back of your mind for good practice. The illusory mode of appearance of things arises indirectly. Things do exist, but merely by the power of name. They exist dependently, not independently. So I find probably although I have obviously no understanding of it experientially, the physics, quantum physics, to me is like now catching up with the Buddhist teachings, because the quantum physics is now more and more just realizing or finding by experiment, by evidence, that there is no particles. There's nothing that is existing from its own side. So there's many, many different scientific tests that show this. So basically what they're doing is catching up with the Buddhist understanding of emptiness. So there's other ways of helping our minds to let go of the sense of holding onto a physical, an independent reality, an independent I. That's just one of them. That to me, that helps me with the physical one. The other thing is to realise that the self, this thing that we're holding onto as me, it also doesn't exist the way it appears. So that's the next topic. Next week we start on emptiness. It's probably quite great. I guess the people who've written the course quite cleverly have put emptiness as the next topic, because this is the way this module ends, looking at the way things exist, the wisdom realising emptiness. So the mind exists in the same way as the external world, subject to cause conditions, nothing independent. So we have definitely the I exists, but the physical body is something here. Alan's something here called Alan. There's a body and there's also consciousness, but that's it. There's nothing actually that's more than that. If we put the label Alan on top of this, what they call the aggregates, collection of physical mental aggregates. Sable's got a really good example of how it works with her example about what a dollar is. Money is a good example of emptiness, really, in the physical world. So she says, if you put 5 20-cent pieces on the table, that's $1, right? We call that $1. So the base, why do we call it $1? Because we know that the 20 cents add up to 100 cents, which is $1. Okay, so that's what the base is, this collection of coins. And on top of that, we put the name dollar. So the dollar doesn't exist except by depending on those coins. Okay, we could have different collection of coins. So the dollar doesn't exist from the side of the coins. The dollar exists from the label that we conventionally put on what somebody's decided some time ago to be 100 cents to the dollar. And so we all adopt that. And but we forget that all that base exists, and we just think that there is somehow some dollar there that's 100% from its own side. I find that very useful example. So in the same way, this collection of what we've got is body and consciousness. There are all these cells. We can break it up into parts. We can look at all the different aspects of our minds, the senses, the thoughts, and memories, and so on. They're all there, but the actual thing, me, I, is just put on top of it, just like the word dollar on the coin. Okay, good example. Other examples, they say traditionally they use the idea of a rainbow. The rainbow is there, we all see it, but can we actually touch it? No, because the closer we get to it, the more it disappears. A mirage, definitely, where that view when we're driving in a hot road and you see what this definitely looks like water on the road. As you get closer to it, to that road. A vivid dream. So all these are said to be examples of how reality exists. They're similar. They're examples. It's not exactly the way reality is. But just as these are self-hallucinatory, something that we just see that we can't hold on to, so reality exists as well, the physical world and the self. Put a name on the aggregates of body and mind. So this is, to me, fantastic. I don't think any other religion in Buddhism teaches wisdom of emptiness, not that I know of. Just so profound and so difficult, but also profound.
Very emphasized in my Zen school.
What's that?
Emptiness is very emphasized in my Zen school.
Your identity.
The emptiness is really emphasized like in the Zen practice. Like my Zen school that I did.
Oh, it emphasizes. Yeah. So some different schools was my emphasize more. Just remember that the Theravada school has exactly the same teachings on emptiness, but the emphasis is to be liberated for self. The self wants to be liberated. This is the Theravada self-liberation. You want end of suffering, so you practice the meditations on emptiness, study it for years and years, get a single point of concentration, and you can purify the mind completely and become liberated from all suffering. So Theravada gives that's nirvana. So, but it's not conjoined as the Tibetan Mahayana tradition is with compassion practice. Okay? So this is what we've got in this 8 verses, is both the compassion practice and the wisdom practice. So the Mahayana tradition say that nirvana is the end of all suffering, but there's another stage. If you combine it with compassion practice, you become fully enlightened being, which is more profound. It's a higher state. Definitely, it's a huge attainment, and there's nothing is ever said derogatory about the Theravada tradition from the Mahayana point of view. But the reasoning is how can we just focus on ourselves and liberate ourselves from this suffering realm that we're in and leave everyone behind. Okay? So this is what the Mahayanas say. So the Mahayanas want to become liberated in order to be able to lead others. If the Buddha hadn't given the teaching after he became enlightened, we wouldn't have been able to study them, and neither would any of the great beings who've become enlightened since. Countless hundreds of beings have become enlightened since the Buddha who practiced their path. So this is why the Mahayana is more beneficial for others. To focus on the other. That's the way it is. There's a few little points there. I'll maybe just leave it to Lama Zopa in his teachings have good how experienced misfortunes can be transformed. You know, if we're having suffering, bad times, pain, annoyances, we can use it to help equanimity, feel that we're part of the human, all human beings suffering, equanimity, which is helping us to develop loving kindness. It helps us to generate renunciation, that we want to leave this suffering realm. Refuge, Buddha Dhamma Sangha offers a way out, so it helps our refuge if we have some misfortunes and other reasons. So he just sort of summarizes all the pluses that come from having problems. That's in one. That's just from his the extracts that's in the reading. So maybe any other questions or comments? Just I think there's a few comments on the chat. I'll just have a look. Okay, so they're just someone's made the very good observation, which is all in the teachings about all beings have been our parents in samsara at one point. All beings have been our parent. Okay, so the teachings focus on the mother, that all beings have been our mother, because traditionally the mother is the one who's given us the most loving kindness, compassion. So if we think of all beings our mother, we have much easier to feel that sense of warmth towards them. But it's also true that all beings have been our father, our uncles, our enemies, our friends, and so on. So, but this focus on the mother helps our practice. And so that's another. Remember that it's a good technique to use for the annoying, the harm giver, the bloody dictator, the trumps, the incredibly annoying people. They've all been our parents or mother at some stage, not in this life, but at some stage. And sometimes the harm giver who's giving us specific harm to us, not just to the human race, but there's been some connection in the past. Okay, so the person has been our mother, but there might have been something we did to that person, and that created the karma for them to cause some harm to us later in another life. But to help feel that warmth towards that person, think of that person as having been our mother at one stage. So that's just somebody making that point. Good, thank you. Okay, so with this one, this is the Tonglen meditation where we use our own problems. Like we think of a particular problem we've got. It could be a health problem, relationship problem, financial problem. We just acknowledge how that problem makes us feel suffering or unease. It could make us be life-threatening. It could be just an annoyance. And then we actually move to acknowledge that whatever problem we've got, this problem, this artist, we've also got exactly the same problem. The same problem. It could be the health problem. It could be the grief, having lost a loved one. So then that's the next step. So it's not just me, but that's the sense of equanimity. There's so many more people now with the same problem. Then there's the more people now with the same problem. Then there's the acknowledgement that there's also countless people with the same problem, much worse. Not just with the coronavirus, but they're actually dying and they will die from. So it's just acknowledging that there's always a worse version. Then you also acknowledge that it's not just this other beings are suffering, they're also suffering problems that I'm not experiencing, just being in a human body. They're aging, they're suffering sickness, they're suffering mental problems, anxiety, depression, and so on. So it's acknowledging that these beings are suffering. Then we come back to our own problem, and we generate the thought, we initiate the thought, we initiate the thought. If I've got this problem, I've got to experience it. Why not use this opportunity? If I've got this problem, I've got to experience it. Why not use this opportunity to develop a big mind and want to actually experience the problem on behalf of others? Wouldn't it be amazing? This is the simulator. If by me having this sickness or this anxiety, or whatever it is, then I can actually having this sickness or this anxiety, or whatever it is, then I can actually stop other beings from having it. Like, may I experience it for them? I'm one, they're countless. Wouldn't it be great if I could just take their problems, experience this problem on their behalf? We stay with that thought. So this sometimes resistance from particularly our ego, we're thinking that I can't do this or whatever. So push button, notice any resistance, just out of the hearts of all beings. But it's a very incredibly powerful practice. It needs visualization. So that's the spending a few moments with the in breath and then spending a few moments with breathing out the white light. So then at the end we just have a sense that we have actually accomplished something, that we feel grateful that we can actually develop this capacity, mental capacity, a brave mind, a bodhisattva mind, of taking on the sufferings of others. So Lama Zopa has got a really good, I think it might be from his, the extracts in the readings. It's from, it's from Transferring Problems Meditation. If you've got the readings at home, it's Meditation 1, Taking and Giving by Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So I've just, when I'm doing the meditation, I'll actually quote some of his words. I'll just give you an example. As you breathe in, imagine you take in all the suffering and causes of all suffering of other living beings through your nostrils in the form of black smoke. If you have an illness or some other problem, focus first on the numberless other beings with the same problem. Then think of all the other problems experienced by living beings as well. As you slowly breathe in the black smoke, take in all this suffering and its causes. Like plucking a thorn out of their flesh, you'll immediately free all the numberless living beings from their suffering. Okay, so very powerful meditation that Rinpoche's got there. So I'll abbreviate it because the time needs that we have to make it a bit short. Okay, so let's just start. Get comfortable. And a few moments to just focus on the breath. We will be using the breath later. I think I'm coming and going with the breath, settle the mind. We begin our compassion Tonglen practice by first bringing to mind a problem that we may have now, experiencing or have experienced in the past. Something that affected our lives and caused us to feel suffering. Could be an illness we've had, or are having. Could be personal relationship problem, could be financial problems, work problems, maybe just mental anxiety, depression, mental suffering, much more profound sometimes than physical suffering. Without going into the actual causes in just feeling that pain or discomfort to our mind from that suffering, acknowledging that we do suffer, do feel the pain. Next step is to acknowledge that while we're experiencing this problem, suffering, other beings, the same moment, are having the same problem, exactly the same. Countless other beings. If we've got a health problem, we can also easily, this time, acknowledge the millions of beings suffering from the coronavirus, dying from coronavirus. Acknowledge the millions of beings suffering from the coronavirus, dying from coronavirus. Also acknowledging not just vast numbers with the same problem, but vast numbers with the same problem in a worse degree, a worse version. Also acknowledging that other beings are suffering not from our problem, but other countless types of problems. Thinking of those suffering from abuse of human rights, people being murdered by regimes, dictatorial regimes, military regimes, those suffering natural disasters, famine, drought, cyclones, those suffering mental suffering such as depression, anxiety, accepting the truth of the suffering of other beings, countless other beings. Now we come back to our problem. We generate a thought. If I had to have this problem, how wonderful it would be if I could free other beings from having the same problem. How wonderful if I could experience, if I could free other beings from having the same problem. How wonderful if I could experience this on behalf of others, entering that thought into our mind. May I experience this problem for them. I and one, they count. They are my mother, sentient being. For them. I and one, they count. They are my mother, sentient being. They all have been my mothers in the past. By accepting their suffering on myself, I can relieve those other beings from this problem. Not just this problem, but all their problems. Just watching that thought in our mind, staying with that thought. Then we use our in-breath now to visualize all those beings around us, visualizing their human form, suffering beings. With each in-breath, imagine we lift the problems and sufferings from those beings in the form of black smoke out of their hearts, our in-breath takes the problem out, and we take it into our hearts, destroying any reluctance to, and we take it into our hearts, destroying any reluctance to give to others, our self-cherishing, our holding on to self. Quoting Lama Zopa, if we have an illness, quoting Lama Zopa, if we have an illness or any other problem, think all the other problems experienced by living beings, they're all being relieved by my action. Like plucking a thorn out of their flesh, and instantly free all the numberless beings from all their suffering. We also take from others all the undesirable environments in the form of basma, all the undesirable places that beings experience. Those beings in the red hot hell realms, the cold hells, animals suffering, dirty places, inhabited by human beings. Taking this in with our in-breath, absorbing into our self-cherishing, destroying the self-cherishing. Destroys our self-cherishing, non-existent false I that we hold on to, truly existing. Reaching back. Now, changing to the out-breath, focusing on our out-breath. With each out-breath, we visualize that we're breathing out all our positive qualities in the form of white light. All our love, our compassion, wisdom, merit, realization, patience, generosity. We breathe out the white light into the hearts of all these beings, the suffering beings, purifying, healing all their suffering. As Lama Zopa says, we visualize our body as a wish-granting jewel which can grant all the wishes of living beings, giving them everything we have to every living being, all our good karma, all our happiness, our possessions, family, friends, body. With each out-breath, living beings receive what they want. Those who want a friend, find a friend. Those who want a guru, find a guru. Those who want a job, find a job, a doctor. Those who want medicine, find medicine. Those with disease we become the medicine that cures that disease. With each out-breath, giving them all of what these beings what they need before oneself. Final step is to rejoice and imagine that we have actually succeeded in relieving beings from their suffering. By doing this practice, to quote one observer, he says, we've purified our own body and mind and experiencing bliss, the bliss that pervades our entire body. Just as we do this practice, it helps us and all sentient beings to come closer to enlightenment. So we dedicate any positive merit, inputs in our mind to come closer to enlightenment for the benefit of enlightened beings. Okay, I'll just briefly read Observer's dedication for the pandemic. However many sick sentient beings there are, may be free from all sickness, may all the sickness without exception, transmigrating being, never occur again. The Lord dedicated to that. Okay, that's it. It's a lot to cover in one meditation. As Glenda said, it's repetition. So if we just familiarise ourselves with this practice, the more we do it, the easier it becomes. Thanks so much for coming. Just end the stream. Thank you out there. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. Remember that's the new topic. It's wisdom of emptiness. And I'll send out the materials probably the day before. Okay, good night. Thanks for being here.